It's July 13th, 6 p.m., 2022, Finance and Revenue Committee. We're joined by myself, Nick Allen, Bernie Flynn, and Brian McGinnis. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Item number 2 is comments, suggestions, petitions by residents and attendants regarding items not on the agenda. I know we have one. Councilman Flynn.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to amend our Finance Committee agenda for this evening to discuss the RFP for professional services with the intent that the Finance Committee takes over the evaluation because it's taking way too long to get through the system.
Sure. Yeah. Why don't, I guess we can, it kind of does make sense. We'll make it 3C. We can talk about it there, keep it in the discussion section. So 3C on the agenda, then we'll be discussing the RFP as a Finance Committee.
Should I make a motion?
Do we need to do that?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll make a motion
Sure,
that we amend the Finance Committee agenda to discuss the RFPs for professional services.
Sure. I guess do we call it? I mean, it's not a voting session. I don't know if we're going to call the whole question, but I'm good with it. So yeah, we'll roll. Yeah. Awesome. 3A is our financials.
Good evening. Starting on page 1, the June 2022 cash balances report. We started the month with $14,435,748 in cash. We brought in $3,370,742. We transferred out or spent $4,607,414. This left us with an ending cash balance of $13,199,076, and of this amount, $6.5 million is for restricted purposes. Moving over to page 2, the interfund activity report. The balance at June 30th is $10,030,954 for amounts owed between the funds. This is down by $275,000 by the amount that was reported at 5/31. So we have been trying to pay down some of these balances and make sure that we're transferring all the interfund activity each month. Moving over to page 3, I've included an American Rescue Plan funds review in this packet. This is a little different than the next agenda item. This is specifically looking at the first tranche that we received back in October of 2021. And now that bills are coming through and we're making payments on things, I felt it was important to report what the actual cash balance in the account is at this time. So as of through 6/30/2022, we have spent about $490,000 on approved projects, and we have $557,953 left in physical cash from the first payment that we received. Moving over to page 4, the budget to actual summary. We had actual revenues for the year ended June 30th of $20,819,422. This is offset by actual expense of $15,613,198, and this leaves us in a positive position for the year end of $5,206,224, and of that net income amount, $3.6 million is attributable to the general fund. So moving over and looking at the overview for the year ended June 30th, 2022. We're starting to get a clearer picture of where we're going to end up and how our expectations are being met. At this point in time, we expect most of the line items to be about 50% of their budget left. Anything that does not meet that criteria is being monitored, and that information is being relayed to the department heads. Looking at the revenues, general fund revenues, both real estate taxes and EIT are coming in very strong. We are still seeing de-transfer tax that is not quite meeting our expectations at this point in time. We had a budget of $850,000. We've only brought in about $268,000. So that item is still trailing, and we are still keeping, a close eye on it. In the month of June, we did receive our refund from the PA Municipal Health. That number came in at $464,000, which beat the budget of $250,000. And again, this is because we do have a self-funded insurance plan, and this is based on prior year claims. The violation of ordinances, police alarms, and restitutions continue to trail budget. Looking at wastewater, I'm happy to say that the residential sewer is finally starting to catch up with our expectations. I think part of this is that, the new rates that went into effect are finally catching up, as well as some past billings that were owed to us from Aqua for East Bradford Township. We are still seeing the tap-in fees, commercial sewer, and the outside plant revenue that's still trailing budget. And because of this, we're still going to hold off on the budgeted transfer from the sewer fund to the general fund. Parking is doing well. Budgeted expectations for revenues are being met. We do see the permit revenue is trailing a little bit, but I believe that will catch up in August when the season officially begins. Moving over to the expense side, on the general fund, legal other is over budget by $47,000. The boards and commissions line item also shows an over budget at this point in time, but that line item includes the payment for the railroad study, which will be reimbursed to us by a grant. Fuel expense and heating oil continue to be significant across the board on all departments. Overtime in parking, public works, and police are meeting expectations at this point in time, but the wastewater department is over budget by 20%. Equipment repair in both the public works and fire departments, they're trending high and they're getting close to budget. We are, again, keeping an eye on that, but we've had some big repairs in the Public Works Department for the trash truck, recycling, and some equipment purchases that were made. So that's kind of bumped that line item up a little bit. And the fire trucks, they're usually big repairs, which cost a lot and have to be shipped out to facilities that can handle those sorts of repairs. They're not done on site. Sludge removal in the Taylor Run plant is, again, the sludge removal in the Taylor Run line item, that is meeting close to budget. And with talking with the department, we've heard that variations in temperature tend to run this up, and it makes this, line item, it makes the expenses higher. So one, I think, good note that we were able to transfer $500,000 to pay down the police pension MMO. I'd like to do that quarterly so the payment doesn't hurt as bad at year end. So the amount that we still owe on that MMO obligation is about $1.1 million for the police pension. Are there any questions?
Go ahead.
I have two more. I forgot to write down the word next to it. It could have been the tap-in fees, the $850,000, and we only brought in $268,000. Was that the tap-in fees?
Yeah, so tap-in fees, we had a budget, we've only brought in $2,332 in tap-in fees for the year. We had a budget of $370.
Okay.
Well, that's actually a line item that I had under other business, but we can talk about it then.
Questions? Mr. McGinnis?
Yeah, I do want to point out, you mentioned that the wastewater treatment is 20% over budget year to date
For overtime,
for overtime.
yes.
Okay. And I know that we've had that discussion before and we were presented with materials. And that may be something council might need to consider is leasing out wastewater treatment moving forward. That's a discussion to see what happens. I'm not there with selling anything, but I do think that we should consider leasing that.
I mean, we can definitely talk about it. I think that's like what's the budget for the overtime for wastewater?
It was 15,000.
So
So we're
20% of
about
that.
17,000, and we're only through June 30th. I do know that there's been, staffing problems. To the best of my knowledge, they are working on trying to fill that. So that,
So-
it is a work in progress, trying to make sure that, we're not hitting that, making it worse than what it is.
So like projecting out, if the second half of the year is the same as the first half of the year, we'd be like 34K total, which would put us like 19K over the line item, which is a very small percentage of the expenses in that department. So that's like the leasing thing's like obviously a really huge conversation. So I mean, this is a very small, relatively small thing.
Yeah, Sean Mitchell did come to us 2 months ago and said that, or a month and a half ago, and said that he has a full complement now of all employees at Wastewater. So hopefully the overtime, in the next 60 days should dwindle off. If not, then we should have a discussion of why we have an issue. But leasing the wastewater treatment plant is a much better way than selling it, that's for sure. Yeah, I agree with Mr. McGinnis.
I guess I agree that the one thing is better than the other, but
Yeah.
I'm not,
But-
trust me, I'm not with selling it, after
Yeah.
what happened over in Willistown and
Yeah.
reading that decision and whatnot. I think it would be better suited financially and for the long term to look at a lease possibility.
Sure. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's where I'm coming from on this, but we seem to be doing a pretty fine job. But yeah, I mean, definitely doing our due diligence is important, and it's not a bad conversation to have. I guess a couple questions I had. As we come up on budgeting season, which is soon, will be fun. I know that what I was really concerned about this year was the interfund transfer stuff, so that's moving in the right direction.
Correct.
And the idea, right, was as long as we can keep that number like consistent throughout the calendar year, that can basically just be wiped out as we look at next year, because it's us owing ourselves money. Is that correct?
So our plan was to make sure that we reconcile all interfund activity each month. And then that has been being done. As you can see, the balances are coming down. And then when we meet year end, those numbers that we have should be equal to what we started with. And then we can have the conversation as to whether we would like to write those amounts off. Because currently there's about a little over $6 million, which is the big amount, which is due from the general fund to both the sewer and the parking. Those are the biggest numbers of that $10 million.
Sure. And does this if we are able to successfully do that and go into the new calendar year that way, does that have impact on like Moody's or any of our ratings?
I think it will help with some of those ratings because there are, those were points that were brought up. And I think that's always a good thing to make sure that we're kind of following through on what we need to do to kind of make the financial picture better than what it currently has been in the past. So.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, I think that's great news all around. So thank you. It's been in its own way exciting to watch that number this year. So thanks again. Any other questions? Public comment questions? All righty, great. Thank you. I think we're good then for 3B, which is to talk a little bit more about our ARPA funding.
Good evening, everyone. Will Williams, Sustainability. So being that we're closing the books on the second quarter, I wanted to give an update to Borough Council on where we stand with our capital projects this year. So we put this together. I'll go through quickly the columns here, pretty self-explanatory, but on the very far left hand, we got the fund and department, project name, project ID, which is an internal system we've created to help us track documents and files and things like that. Budget, final cost. So Barb mentioned her report was showing cash progress to date. This column, final cost, is when a project is closed out. We have all of our invoices, all of our costs accounted for. We're finally filling in that blank. So that's why there's only 5 projects completed. And I will add that as a typical, our capital planning, we're finishing our projects in the second half of the year generally. I have a couple categories here that we created internally, and then scrolling over to the right, some description notes on each, estimated completion date in terms of quarter and year, and then very rudimentary traffic light style. Green means go, yellow is maybe area for maybe concern, and then red is where we're having significant changes to what was budgeted. That is in terms of the schedule, scope, and the budget for the project. So again, I want to emphasize that having only 5 projects in the books and completed at this point in the year is pretty standard. A lot of these are big projects. And one of the problems that we are having, which I'm sure we're all tired of hearing about by now, is supply chain issues, equipment being back ordered, and short staffing amongst vendors, contractors, consultants, things like that, that are slowing down project timelines. Pretty much everything that isn't completed here, that is equipment or technology related, we're a little concerned in terms of schedule just because those parts, components, whatever, are back ordered. Last night it was mentioned that the tertiary filter system down at Taylor Run, they're waiting on doors and windows, and they hope to have them by November. And when it gets cold, it'd probably be nice to have those, but it's really tough out there trying to get certain things. So yeah, just a handful that might not wrap up this calendar year. But on a brighter note, the ones that are in the books there's no room for concern on budget on any of these. The ones that are completed at this point are slightly pleasantly under budget. So that's a good thing. I wanted to touch on a few in stream protection fee, which happens to be the one that I'm the most close to, but better scope. The first one is filter style BMP at East Nields. This was written into one of our old pollution reduction plans for the Goose Creek watershed, and it called for this modular catch basin type thing to be dropped in, replacing what's already there immediately south of the Wyeth site, and that helps with stormwater quality. And when this concept was drawn up years ago, they picked that location because such a large area drains into it. This year, what we're working on is, and you'll see the budget for this project is only $15,000. The idea being we design and bid it out this year and get ready to put it in the ground next year. When we started the design, we realized that because the drainage area is so big, it's not really feasible to do it. But also with pending redevelopment of the Wyeth site, some of this stuff can be put onto the backs of the developers rather than the borough. Along those lines, you'll see the one red section here is the scope related to West Washington storm sewer extension. That project originally called for the extension of the storm sewer across the lot that's being redeveloped. Was the laundromat. It's not going to be an orthodontist office. They're actually doing that work on our behalf, so we don't have to spend money on that. So that's why the scope has changed. We're not doing that project. They are. But should have a similar timeline. That site work will have to be completed very early in that process, and probably late this year, early next year. So same outcome, but we're saving $195,000. The last one is Lyndon Franklin Street Culvert. This also came up last night in Public Works. We have really dug in on this and learned a couple things in the initial design and sort of fact gathering portion, working with our engineer. First is that while we all know that there's bad flooding down there, happens in the vicinity of the culvert, we're pretty confident at this point that it's actually not the culvert that's causing the flooding. It's it's a right angle basically, and that stream was rerouted sometime in the last 150 years ago. There's two right angles, and the slope of that stream at that location just drops, and that water effectively is hitting a brick wall. That's what causes it to pool up and cause the flooding. The other thing we learned is we were originally planning on replacing that culvert. It's actually in pretty good shape. We had a new engineering assessment done by Pannoni earlier this year, and they said, there's some things that need to be done, mostly superficial, but you don't need to replace this. So that is also changing in scope. And I hate to say we're going back to square one on that, but what we're doing is coming up with a fresh plan that's really going to get to flood mitigation upstream of the culvert rather than try to address the culvert again.
Will, quick question. Has there been any discussion about cleaning that stream?
Yeah, we had lengthy conversations about that. Don Edwards is working on a sort of like a maintenance plan. We have been mapping in GIS all of these tricky areas, parts of the MS4 that, we're mapping the entire MS4 in great detail, but as a part of that project, we're mapping these areas that need special attention every quarter, every year, whatever, in terms of cleaning things out, removing debris, things like that. So yes, that's going to be, so we're going to have a structured maintenance plan for that area of the creek. And
Because I believe the last time that stream was cleaned down there was probably over 20 years ago.
Yeah. Well, we'll get it.
The only reason why I know, I was a member of Public Works around that time when they were doing it. And obviously, I think, the things that they pulled out of there, they lead to flooding as well. So, thank you for doing this, and Don for bringing that to everyone's attention too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any?
Well, the question down there by the Greenfield area, are we permitted to take a backhoe or a crane and change the topography of the creek, or that's not going to do the creek?
We can't just go out and do it any
Okay.
given day. We'd have to pull DEP permits to do it anytime we want to do it.
Okay.
So in terms of getting, a tree that falls and washes down, a shopping cart, things like that, we can go in and do that. Anytime we're really disturbing anything in the water course, we have to pull a DEP permit. And we can't just say, okay, we're going to go in there with a backhoe and it'll be better when we're done. It's not just as simple as applying for the permit and getting it. We'd have to give them confidence in what we're doing as well. But yeah, cleaning is certainly part of routine maintenance. So that's all for capital. On the second page there, Jeff, is an update on Arpa spending and appropriations, similar format. So on the left, you'll see department project names. Third column is 2021 Arpa plan. I think November last year, we presented an initial plan as well as the two asks up front, Everhart and the street sweeper. Fourth column, council appropriation, and then fifth is the date of that appropriation. Final cost if the project is completely wrapped up. The next column there is if there was a deviation between actual costs and the appropriation. Those are both surpluses category, and then some notes on the project here. One thing to point out is of those first two projects that we appropriated funding for in 2021, we ended up about $69,000 under budget between those two projects. That can go back into the money that we can reappropriate. At this point, the total received minus what we've appropriated minus the underspent on what we have appropriated means we have about $297,000 left of the initial 2001 deposit to appropriate. But I think it would be unwise to run out and try to look for things to spend this money on. This is a backstop for capital projects that run over budget, and given the things I mentioned about equipment being back ordered, inflation, staffing shortages, that's a very real probability. The other thing is emergencies. You know, if a trash truck dies, a sinkhole, something along those lines, $300,000 disappears very, very quickly. So I think it's best to kind of sit on that until an emergency presents itself.
Any questions? I just had a couple like little details, I guess. Green light go, do you know when that's going to be completed?
Yeah, we had a call today with TPD about that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sean. I think they order.
Yeah, mid-October, the infrastructure would be in place, and then we would have to go through a program to set the timing for those 22 integrated traffic lights, and those are not all the traffic lights in the borough,
Yeah.
but the timing sequence would have to be programmed, and but the infrastructure installation should be done by October.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been a little slow going. The most recent holdup was moving utilities to new poles. So you think about everything that's on a telephone pole in the
Yeah.
borough, it has to be moved by Verizon, Comcast, whatever, and their contractors. And surprise, they're not all that responsive when you say, hey, can you guys move your wires to this new pole? So that's taken a lot of time recently.
Okay, well that's great news. This is before my time was all this stuff, so
Yeah.
it'll be exciting to have this done. And then the nodes getting installed, it's like awesome progress. That's something that I know I've heard a lot from residents about. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. And then do you know when the like last 25% of those are going to be set?
Very shortly, programming and hooking up the. So I would imagine that's also end of quarter, very beginning of fourth quarter completion. And that's installation, connected, programmed, and operational.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, that's all I have.
I do have one final
Yeah, go ahead.
question. Do we know the status on the project connecting Westchester to Giant to East Bradford?
Yeah, that is where is that one here? It's on the Arpa sheet. It's Downingtown Pike, Bradford Plaza. So they broke ground there maybe 2 weeks ago. I think this is another one where we're not going to need all of the appropriation because if you recall, we bid it out. It was over budget. We bid it again and it came in way under budget. And we double, triple checked everything was okay. And contractor did seem like they made some mistakes, but they honored the bid that they submitted. So that project is underway. And whatever's left after the grant is then there's, I think, $5,000 from the owner of the Bradford Plaza Shopping Center. And then what's left after that is to be split between the borough and East Bradford.
Yeah, and we're working through logistics with East Bradford right now because the grant through PennDOT, which is going to fund the majority of that project, the grantee is East Bradford Township. So we're working with them to figure out just how the transaction sequence is supposed to run and how East Bradford will be reimbursed. We're ironing out those details. Yeah, we could be able to communicate probably shortly a completion date on that project.
Yeah.
Considering they've broken ground. They don't waste time once they start.
Yeah, and it's not a very complex project. So I would imagine that would be more or less done in a few weeks, and then it would take a few more weeks to clean up the landscaping and things like that.
Well, with that corner there, on the 7th Ward side, that's where the apartments are. They've done the excavation there and they've leveled it out and they're getting ready. And there's a traffic light right there.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you stand at the traffic light and you look across to Giant, there's very little room because there's a gigantic red wall that's about 40 feet tall right there. So I don't remember how we're going to allow the residents to cross safely. We're going to let them be safe on the borough side, but what happens when they get on the side of Giant because there's no sidewalk there? There's no excavation there. There's a 40-foot wall there.
Yeah. I know we ran into the retaining wall issue pretty early on, and that need to be moved. But it's not one holding up the parking lot. It's the landscaping right in front of the sign there. I'm pretty sure there is a sidewalk there. We can look on Google Maps right now if you want to. If you want to.
Yeah, Councilperson, there's going to be
Yeah.
yeah, there's going to be a connecting sidewalk from the intersection. It's going to probably upset that landscaping that's on the corner there of the Bradford Plaza. And it's going to connect to the existing sidewalk, which is just inside of that retaining wall that heads into Bradford Plaza. So there would be a continuous sidewalk connection.
Sidewalk go up the driveway, or there's a dead end right there? I said, good luck.
Yeah.
It goes up the driveway.
It does?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Any other final? Yes, Mayor DiBaptiste.
Mhm. Yeah, so these are budgeted capital projects for 2022 out of the stream protection fee. And there's nothing related to Montgomery Avenue in that budget this year. Yeah.
All right. I think that's it. I think we're good. Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. This was helpful. And then we can go on to our new agenda item 3C, which is about our RFPs.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
go ahead.
you, Mr. Allen. The reviewing and looking at the legal and engineering RFPs, they've been in the borough now for at least 2.5 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. And they've just been, as far as council's concerned, sitting there. And I mentioned to Mr. McGinnis and Mr. Allen, it would be a fair shake for the finance team to take a look at the legal and engineering bids and then report back to council on which ones which two of each category we feel is legitimate. And let council decide what they want to do, because there's a lot of bids in there to go through. And if it falls into the finance committee, at least we could do it.
Anything to help the process along, I'm in favor of. Dana, sitting to my right here, created a spreadsheet comparing some of the costs of both of those service types that's in that folder. We have all of the RFP submittals in those two folders. So I look forward to that conversation.
I guess like a question I have about that is like really more about precedent. Is that something that we've done in a committee before with RFPs, or is that like executive session normally? Like how has that been handled in the past?
If I've been here, I guess, 6 years now. I believe most of the time, the finance department has done it, and then they report to council. But as things are sitting there now, as Mr. Metric mentioned, it wouldn't hurt to have a second set of eyes, looking through it and then reporting either to finance or to council on the top two in each category. Because we have quite a few legals to go through, and then a few engineerings. So, Mr. McGinnis, what do you think?
I mean, yeah, I'm new to council, but I do think since we did put out the RFPs, I do think that it would make sense for us to look at it. If we could just, if Sean, if you could let us know exactly how many solicitors do we need for each category, or I'm assuming one for each category that we discussed, and then with engineers as well. Do we have one borough engineer for one set of criteria? I think that would need to be explained to the entire council as well.
Okay, I can put something in writing to council that would explain those services. We do have a number of different specialties in engineering that you don't often find under one umbrella. And sometimes if you are looking for everything under one umbrella, you're typically talking about a larger firm and you're talking about higher costs. I know that's true in the legal field. And we have certain legal specialities that we need to complement our base municipal land use and litigation services.
Thank you. Ms. Dorsey, you wanted to add something?
Lisa Dorsey, Ward 7, 427 North New Street. So um, we requested the RFP for both engineering and legal. And it was a discussion, I think, with myself and Mr. Metric to put those together and put them on a drive for all of council to review. And I don't have a concern with Finance Committee, reviewing them and making a recommendation. However, the ask was for all council members to review them and make a recommendation. And that's what I'd like to see happen for legal as well as for engineering. Again, I don't have a concern with finance having an opinion and putting forth a recommendation, but I do believe it is on each council member to review, as I have done, what's in that drive.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think what we should probably do is really nail down what we've done in the past, just to make sure we're 100% sure what's been done before. And I mean, in my mind, it makes sense to look at this at a work session,
Yeah.
personally,
And I
get everyone involved because it's going to impact everyone.
I think some of the delay has been related to some of the other issues that have been a priority, and that's the reason that we haven't been able to move this forward. And we made in conversation with Mr. Metric, made a conscious decision that the other items needed to be, put forth in an executive or a working session before we tackled the legal and engineering.
Yes, Mr. Dorsey, that's why I just asked that it goes to a committee that could actually look through it. And then if the members of council want to attend that committee meeting, we can go through it because it's waiting for all 7 of us to come to a consensus independently. Writing something, Mr. Metric, could take another 4 or 5 months, 6 months.
I don't think that was the plan. I think the plan was to get it on the August agenda. Yeah, that was the plan.
Are we good with that as long as we're moving? It'll be a long meeting, but
Yeah.
but if we bring everyone to a finance meeting,
Yeah.
it will be the same issue.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get it done.
We'll go what?
August.
Sure.
Yeah. Whatever. And that's where I mean, like, it'd be good to know what we did before and maybe try to keep it consistent. But yeah, sounds good. We can nail that down. Any questions, thoughts? All right. Let's take action now, finally. 4A is our amendment to sewer tap-in fees.
Yes, this should look familiar. Last month's meeting, we considered the sewer tap fee study, which was has to be done to justify the tap-in fees that you would charge single and multiple family dwellings to join to the sewer system. The numbers in this ordinance are the maximum that you're allowed to charge for the sewer tap-in fees. Currently, one EDU, basically the equivalent of a single-family dwelling, is $2,332. That number should sound familiar because that's the revenue in the sewer fund. So we've had one hookup this year.
And this would go into effect as soon as we pass the ordinance, I'm assuming,
Correct.
unless someone already has paid.
Correct.
It is
It would
ongoing.
go in as soon as the ordinance was passed. However, it would not apply to any projects that are currently in the queue of land development.
No, sounds good to me. I think it's about time. It's been many, many, many years. Any questions, concerns? Call it a 3-0? All right, perfect. And then 2022, or it's not 2022, June 2022 minutes are fine by me. Mr. McGinnis, we good? Cool. All righty. And then other business 5A is about our committee meeting schedule.
So what we're looking for here, next month we will have a preliminary budget before the Finance Committee. So what we were looking to do, in years past, we had department heads that made their presentations at either a special Finance Committee or in September. So we wanted to switch out between We wanted to make smart growth at 6 o'clock and put finance at 6:30 so that we would have additional time just to, talk through any budget issues or financial issues as we go through the end of the year. So that is the
Yeah.
request, to change the meeting times from 6 o'clock to 6:30, just to swap out with smart growth.
Yeah, it's what we've always done, I think, so.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, selfishly, I'd like to not do that, but I think it's for the greater good, so that sounds good. And that's going to be next month then, August,
yes.
okay. Well, I'll be here anyway. That's the kind of thing I will forget, so that's not a problem. 5B is our pension committee recommendation.
So yeah, this is hot off the press. Sean Metrick, Borough Manager, speaking. And as you recall, in May 11th of this year, RFPs were due to the borough for investment management services for the non-uniform and uniform pension plans. We received a lot of interest in that opportunity. The pension plan committee formed by council last year met to discuss those candidates, and we invited two of them for an interview, and they came on Monday and interviewed with us Monday afternoon. The entire committee was present. We were able to ask questions, hear answers, query them about how they work, who they are, where they're from, how they would best serve the borough's interest as a client with $70 million under assets. And the pension plan committee voted unanimously to recommend to Borough Council that it enter into a contract, the borough enter into a contract for services with the Courtney Investment Consultant Group and Royal Bank of Canada Wealth. They are a business located in Conshohocken, and some of the reasons outlined in this short memo to the committee are below for making this recommendation. And this was endorsed unanimously. So I'm here to present on behalf of the committee, since I am a member of the committee, what the committee is recommending to council.
Okay, great. I mean, I don't have any concerns with that. Awesome. Thanks again for the task force that made this happen. All about it. Yeah, sounds good. Great. Is there any other business tonight? Thanks for being patient with us. We will go ahead and adjourn. We
Just
will
one
not
thing,
adjourn.
I forgot to mention one item about this memo. I will not be here next week, but Eric Wilcombs from the Pension Plan Committee will be at the work session to answer questions in front of full council. So we're not asked, since this popped up on a Monday, agenda is already published. We're not asking for any action from the committee. We're just making you aware of this. We're going to, with your consent, bring it over to the work session to talk about with everyone, and Eric will be here to lead that conversation.
Yeah, sounds really good. I look forward to that. Yeah, thank you. So we will go ahead and adjourn, still 15 minutes late, but we did our best. Thank you.